What if the most terrifying experiences in gaming aren't found in the corporate halls of AAA development studios, but in dimly lit bedrooms, created by a handful of sleep-deprived visionaries staring into monitors at 3 a.m. with far too much caffeine and far too little sanity? We've entered a strange new age of horror, when where the biggest scares don't come from the biggest budgets, but from imagination, isolation, and a total disregard for what's marketable. Because fear has evolved. And right now, the most unsettling, most creative, and most emotionally resonant horror isn't coming from the giants, it's coming from the outsiders. So tonight, we're going to step off the beaten path a little and into the shadows of indie horror, a realm where the rules are different, the ideas are weirder, and the fear is real. This is more than a trend nowadays. This might very well be the future of fear. For decades, horror games followed the formula. You had your monster, your flashlight, your conveniently empty hallway, and of course, your mandatory jump scare that would probably make your cat leave the room in protest. Don't get me wrong, the classics still hold up. Resident Evil and Silent Hill practically built the foundation for digital terror. But as horror grew more commercial, something strange happened. The fear got comfortable. AAA horror titles, as impressive as they look, often walk a fine line between terror and action blockbuster. Somewhere along the way, we stopped feeling helpless. You would walk into a haunted mansion and think, okay, I have a shotgun, I will be fine. And the moment you feel fine, horror kinda dies. Fear doesn't thrive in control. It thrives in vulnerability, in uncertainty, in that moment when the game whispers, "You're not safe," and you actually believe it. That's where indie horror steps in. While the big studios were polishing their particle effects and calculating audience metrics, indie devs were sitting in the dark, studying the blade, experimenting, asking uncomfortable questions. What if you couldn't fight back? What if the scariest part wasn't what's chasing you, but what's inside your own head? Suddenly, we had Amnesia: The Dark Descent making us terrified of opening doors, Lone Survivor showing us psychological breakdown through pixel art, and then Doki Doki Literature Club proving that even cute dating sims could make us fear the delete key on our keyboard. Indie horror redefined fear, not through spectacle but through emotion. Indie horror thrives on one glorious advantage: no one's telling them no. There are no focus groups, no boardrooms full of executives debating whether trauma is a monetizable feature. Just a few creators, their twisted imaginations, and whatever tools they can scrape together. And that freedom, that absolute disregard for corporate polish, is what gives indie horror its teeth. When you don't have millions to spend, you make every pixel, every sound, every moment count. Phasmophobia took multiplayer horror, something most studios had failed miserably at, and turned it into a new kind of nightmare. Not because of complex AI or next-gen visuals, but because it forced players to communicate. And nothing is scarier than having to whisper, "Is anyone here?" into a haunted house and getting an answer. Iron Lung dropped us into a rusted submarine trapped miles beneath a blood ocean and made us stare at static for an hour. And it was one of the most claustrophobic, nerve-shredding experiences ever coded. Meanwhile, Amnesia: The Dark Descent reminded us that sometimes the smartest move is to hide in a closet and quietly question our life choices. It would be unfair to call these video games. They're experiments. Unfiltered, deeply personal works of fear that come from a place of passion and not profit. The makers of these games and many others use video games as a medium to convey their vision of horror to you, the player. And that's something no marketing team can replicate. Because the truth is, horror has always belong to the outsiders. The weird kids, the ones doodling monsters in their notebooks instead of paying attention in math class. Indie horror is just their latest stage, and they're killing it. Indie horror is kinda about breaking the mold. Or it's even more than that, honestly. It's melting it down and sculpting something strange and alive. In the last few years, we've seen something fascinating happen. Horror games are no longer confined to the screen. They bleed into our lives, into our feeds, into our Discord servers. Take Faith, for example, right? The Unholy Trinity, a pixelated exorcism game that somehow feels more real than most hyper-detailed AAA releases. Its minimalist visuals force your brain to fill in the blanks, while its hidden messages and kinda ARG-like secrets whisper that something is still out there, waiting to be found. Or take The Backrooms, part of the analog horror movement, a series of unsettling videos that became a community event. Suddenly, fear wasn't a solo experience anymore. It was collective. You weren't just watching horror, you were participating in it. This is what indie horror does best. It turns horror into a conversation. You play, you analyze, you theorize, and the game keeps evolving because you do. Community-driven horror is practically its own ecosystem now. Games like Phasmophobia or Lethal Company thrive not just because they're scary, but because players create stories with them. Every session is different, every screen becomes content. It's horror designed for the digital age, unpredictable, social, and weirdly memeable. And then there's the rise of subgenres that AAA studios wouldn't even dare to touch. Cosmic horror that questions the nature of existence. Liminal horror that turns empty malls and parking lots into nightmares or familiarity. Take Iron Lung again. You're trapped in a steel coffin. In Mouthwashing, you're stranded in the middle of nowhere while trying to survive in a psychological nightmare. In Skin Freak, you're a taxi driver who drives all kinds of weirdos around while trying to watch your back. These aren't just settings, they're emotional spaces. They hit us because they feel like reflections of modern life. Isolation, monotony, the uncanny dread of seeing something almost normal. The future of horror is about smaller feelings now. It isn't about bigger monsters anymore. It's the quiet, existential kind of horror that linger long after you close the game. If you ever played a low-budget horror game and thought, why is this scarier than something that costs $10 million? Well, congratulations, you experienced the magic of creative limitation. There's something powerful about not having all the tools. When you don't have a Hollywood art team or a motion capture studio, you start thinking differently. You focus on atmosphere. You make every sound, every flicker, every line of text matter. In World of Horror, Junji Ito-inspired dread unfolds through black and white pixel art. You don't need 4K textures when your imagination is doing the heavy lifting and filling the blanks. In Fear and Hunger, you're constantly out of resources, out of lights, out of hope. And that scarcity becomes the horror itself. These games prove that fear isn't about fidelity or believability or credibility, I guess. It's about focus. Compare that to AAA horror, where entire teams are devoted to rendering individual drops of blood. It's impressive, sure, but by the time the particle system's done simulating, the tension is long gone already. Minimalism is terrifying because it engages you. You're not just seeing the monster, you're building it in your head. The lack of clarity makes the experience intimate. You're complicit in your own fear. Think about the sound design too. How many indie horror moments live rent-free in your head just because of a single sound cue? The low drone in Iron Lung, the whispers in, say, Madison, the broken tape loop ambience of Paratopic. When budgets shrink, creativity swells. It's almost poetic, like fear itself works best when it's cornered. And maybe that's why indie horror feels so personal. There's no comedy, no marketing department, just someone with a weird idea, a strong cup of coffee, and the willingness to make you deeply uncomfortable. In that way, I know this is gonna sound cliche, but in that way, indie horror is kind of like punk rock. Rough around the edges, emotionally raw, and defiantly human. Here's the wild part though. Indie horror isn't just doing its own thing now, it's also influencing the entire genre at the same time. I don't know if you noticed this. The DNA of indie fear is now spliced into everything. You can see it in Resident Evil 7's shift to the first person dread. You can feel it in Dead Space's return to isolation and silence with the remake. Even AAA studios are realizing that horror doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to feel personal. And this influence goes both ways. The success of indie games has shown that fear doesn't need a $70 price tag to hit hard. With engines like Unity and Unreal more accessible than ever, anyone with a laptop and a half-formed nightmare can start building something. The barriers are gone. Most of the horror games on itch.io, which are really liked by maybe millions of people, most of them are free games. They're not, like, leave $70 alone. They're not even priced anything. They're for free and they're great. We've entered an era where horror has been democratized. Streamers amplify it, players analyze it, developers remix it. Fear has become collaborative, a shared emotion across millions of glowing screens. It's honestly beautiful in a deeply unsettling way. Indie horror represents what horror has always been about: experimentation, the willingness to make people uncomfortable in new ways, the refusal to play it safe. The future of fear isn't about chasing trends or maximizing profit. It's about curiosity. It's about honesty. It's about one question: what scares you? And when that question comes from someone who isn't trying to sell you anything, just trying to share what keeps them up at night, the answer hits a lot harder. Fear has always been cyclical. Every time the genre stagnates, something small and strange drags it back into the light. Or, more accurately, in this sense, back into the dark. Indie horror is proof that the scariest ideas don't come from the biggest teams, but from the people who feel fear most intimately. The artists who don't just design horror, but rather live with it. I know that sounds kind of bad, but when you're too deep into horror in a creative sense, you kind of just live with it. You learn to live with it, even when you're scared of something or when you have a childhood trauma or something that's been bothering you. You start to cope with it in different creative ways. And why not turn that into a game and see if other people will resonate with that fear? It's actually a smart way of using that fear or coming to terms with it. And it's kind of poetic, I guess. I like that idea of using your own horror to scare other people. And by doing this, you're also sharing this experience and turning this into a collaborative, common, bigger experience. And maybe that's why these games linger. They remind us that horror isn't a product, it's a mirror. It reflects our anxieties, our isolation, our fascination with the unknown. Maybe the next great horror masterpiece won't come from a corporate studio. I'm saying maybe, but most likely it won't be that way. Maybe it's already sitting on someone's hard drive, unfinished, waiting for the courage and maybe a few Steam sales to bring it to life. My friends, the future of fear isn't waiting to be discovered. It's already here. It's in the code, in the pixels, in the minds of creators who can't stop asking, why does this scare me? And if indie horror continues to grow, which I am 100% sure that it will, if it's going to keep experimenting and keep haunting us in new ways, then the future of fear looks bright and it's in good hands. Thank you all so much for watching. This for me is a topic that I'm very passionate about. I hope I didn't miss anything. I hope I didn't bore you with my talk. I hope I didn't break anyone's heart. Anyway, I have been returning to YouTube slowly and streaming. So if you'd like to watch me play some video games live, please check out my Twitch stream and my YouTube streams. I also have a new WOD channel now. Whenever I have a stream happen and right after the stream ends, I take the WOD and upload it to this WOD channel. So it's there forever and it's not gone after a day or two or a week or two. So please check that out. Check out my new videos. Follow Twitter at Horror Visuals. And maybe join the Discord server. We have nice people there, good people who like horror and who discuss horror and honestly just discuss anything else as well. But it's, of course, a horror-centric server. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed this. Please take good care of yourself, and I will see you on the next one.